fact, only about 8 months after General Chuck Yeager broke the speed of sound in 1947, test pilot for North American Aviation, George Welsh, an airplane like the one that's taking off now, in a shallow dive over Edwards Air Force Base in the Mojave Desert, shattered the speed of sound. So clearly, the data that was captured from the Germans in World War II, and the data was regarding swept-wing jets, because that was the technology that Germany was at the end of World War II. They had just gotten into the jet era, and it was an era of speed, just under the speed of sound. So if you wanted to mix it up with the enemy swept-wing aircraft and keep up with his speed, you had to have an aircraft like him. Now remember, the talent from Germany was divided between the U.S. and Russia. Records were made, it was 1950, over the Yalu River in Korea, when Lieutenant Russell Brown in a Lockheed P-80 Shooting Star mixed it up with a MiG-15. It was the first time in history that a plane had downed another one in an all-jet dogfight. Now here's our savior airplane for Korea and beyond, the swept-wing F-86. There's the thing that made it so popular. Look where the wings start at the root and where they end up at the tail. That reduced the onset of what they call buffet boundary, or the ability for the aircraft to have a smooth flow over the wing at high speeds close to the speed of sound. I told you about the Lockheed P-80 Shooting Star and the MiG-15. Now, it was just 2 months later in December, in fact, it was December 17th, when Lieutenant Colonel Hinton mixed it up with an M15. That became history, too, because it was the first time that two adversarial swept-wing fighters had engaged, and one had survived a dogfight. It was purely the jet era. The days of the piston fighter were gone. F-86 Sabre was a breakthrough aircraft, still with some great flying. And with our training with that superior aircraft, the kill ratio was about 10 to 1 in the Korean War. That is, for every one of our jets that got shot down, our F-86s shot down 10. Now, there's some pretty dynamic pilots flying the MiG-15 in the Korean conflict. And it was suspected that they were World War II combat Russian pilots who were out and instructing the Chinese and North Korean pilots on how to fly the MiG, going up on missions, because our F-86 pilots would get slicked by a pretty darn good MiG-15 pilot. And they could tell by the characteristics of the way he was flying the aircraft that he knew it well. He had combat experience from World War II. He was probably a MiG test pilot or instructor pilot. Many of you know the legendary R.A. Bob Hoover, one of the greatest aviators of all times. He had a tremendous amount to do with the testing of this aircraft, and we can talk about it now, but it wasn't to be talked about back in World War II. As a field representative for North American Rockwell, and to allow the pilots to get into the jets and have confidence in the jets and their speeds and their handling characteristics, Bob went to where the war was. And he actually went on missions with the military pilots, and he went as a civilian. He would fly right with her. He said, well, how could I tell them how things would be if I weren't out there being susceptible to the enemy just like they were? And on an evening's conversation with the great legendary Bob Hoover one night, I popped the question, Bob, what's your favorite airplane? And he did not hesitate, ladies and gentlemen. He said, Danny, the F-86 Sabre. He said, wow, was that a breakthrough for us? I tested that extensively. I tested the Air Force version and the Navy version, deliberately crashed them for the factory, represented them out in the field, got them into combat, into bombing as well. And he said that was the airplane that really had an impact on me of all the aircraft that I flew. So we were now definitely in the jet era. There would be no turning back. Ladies and gentlemen, our living history has now been completed in the Korean War. You might hear Korean conflict or the skirmish or whatever, but men went over there and died, and some men never came back. And we promise that we will never forget those individuals. All right, now as we continue our living history, it's time for the Vietnam War. The F-86 will be landing. Next, we're going to see the Sky Soldiers demo. Presented 62 presentations to 7 million people, and today we will see just a small portion of their helicopter flying. Now today, representing the Vietnam era, the helicopters will be in. There'll be 3 actual combat veterans, combat Army veteran helicopters. They will be the AH-1G Cobra, the awesome Cobra attack helicopter, the only known remaining G model Cobra left flying in the country. It served actively with B Troop 101st